Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Singh, and I'm the founder of Publication Academy, your online training partner for higher ed career advancement and professional development. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today for this installment of our Career Pathway series, Exiting Academia. Today, we have a fascinating interview with Dr. Jason Myers, who successfully transitioned from completing a PhD in history into a number of different exciting industry verticals. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Over now to our amazing Publication Academy interviewer, Dr. G. Nantra.
Hi everyone, Dr. G. Nantra here, and today I am super excited to interview Dr. Jason Myers. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in and talk about your educational background and what led to you choosing a career outside of academia.
Yeah, sure. So I have a PhD in modern Irish history. I studied at Loyola University in Chicago, and I finished my PhD in 2010. And I realized, well, I should back up a little bit. I was doing my dissertation research in 2008, and as some people may recall, in 2008 there was a huge financial crash, and the bottom really fell out of the academic job market. I mean, it was already bad, but it got even worse really fast. And at that point, I knew that I just knew that it was going to be such an uphill battle. It just wasn't going to be worth the emotional tax to continue in higher ed. But at the same time, I really enjoyed the work I was doing, so I wanted to finish my PhD. So I went ahead and just buckled down, and I finished a dissertation in the spring of 2010, and then then we moved from Chicago to Denver and started looking for jobs. So initially, what I wanted to do, my initial goal was to stay in higher ed actually, and to sort of work. The PhD is kind of like the union card of higher ed, right? And so the goal was to get on some staff administration jobs and just sort of work my way up on that side, because what I really wanted was continued access to an academic library. And so for a few years, so we moved to Colorado, and so I ended up working at University of Colorado Boulder in the admissions office for about a year, and then after that, I went to the University of Denver in a staff role for 2 or 3 years, something like that. I don't remember. But all the while looking to sort of go up within those organizations, and CU is a public school, and so there was there weren't as many opportunities. It was a big school, but I wasn't having a lot of luck there. And then I went to DU, which is a private school, but again, it was a very flat organization, and the opportunities just weren't sufficient.
Right.
So while I was still at DU in my staff role there, I started just to explore, doing some freelance work, right? So in Denver, there was a big startup scene. I'm not in Denver anymore, unfortunately, but there was a big startup scene out there, and so I've always been interested in technology, and so I was like, I'm just going to get involved. I just, did some information interviews with folks, did some networking, found out, there was this Denver Founders Network. It's a meetup group. And so I went there, and one of the first couple of times I went there, they asked, "Hey, if anyone wants to volunteer to help out, we'll take whatever we can get." I was like, "Well, I can write, so if you guys need like blogs or something, let me know." So like, "Oh yeah, sure, that'd be great." So I got involved with those guys. I started doing some work with them, and then tried to parlay that into other just writing gigs. I started my own blog during this, just to get used to using a content management system, a CMS, like WordPress.
Yeah.
And just started for like a year or two, was just applying like crazy to jobs. It took years to get that out of that. And the thing I learned was, or in hindsight, I realized in 2008 I knew I wasn't going to go into higher ed.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until 2014 or so that I 13, 14 that I was like trying to get out of that and back into
Yeah.
private sector. And I wish I had done more stuff sooner to try
Yeah.
to bridge that gap to make
Right.
that crossover much easier. I think nowadays it's a lot easier to do that in a lot of ways. But then there weren't as many resources like this out there for
Yeah.
folks like me.
Thanks for sharing that. The two things, two comments. I think number one is, you said I knew in 2008 that this is not where I wanted to be, but then it took me a while. And I think that's the story for so many people, because that was my story too, where I knew somewhere in the middle of my PhD and I was done with my PhD in 2015. So I started in 2009, just coming off of that tumultuous year, right? And
Right.
then we had the hiring freezes in academia and all that. And I think in somewhere in 2012 though, I was like, I don't know if I want to be in academia. But then, I feel like a lot of us, when we commit to a path, we carry that identity with us and we're like, I don't want to lose that identity. I don't want this to be a sunk cost. So let me just finish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we talk ourselves out of maybe preparing for something else. So I really do identify with that. And then I also love the fact that when you kind of finally were like, okay, I want to do this, you actually got into community with people. I think that's another mistake people make, is that they think they can figure it out on their own. And definitely there are more resources now. But even as late as 2020 and 2019, when I was trying to figure this out, there weren't as many resources to figure it out. And so you're absolutely right on that. So you transitioned into a content writer role. Talk a little bit about how, I know you talked a little bit about the networking, but
Hmm.
apart from that, what was the application process like to get that job?
Oh my God. Uh, my wife would say, like, I mean, hundreds of applications,
Yeah.
dozens of interviews. You know, I think she kind of like 10 or 12 times as like a final candidate. In this like year and a half, 2 year job search. So it was a long, hard slog. And honestly, I don't even remember. So I got on at this company called Plum Voice. It was since it was acquired in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Um, but and honestly, I don't even remember I guess obviously I must have applied. Probably had a cover letter. I mean, nobody cares about cover letters anymore. I mean, I was just a hiring manager, and if someone had a cover letter, I mean, I would ignore it. Like I
Yeah.
don't care. Like it's all about the resume. Let me see your resume. Show me what you've done. But like at that time, I still thought I needed a cover letter. You don't need a cover letter nowadays, as far as I'm concerned. Um, and then I went in. I must have had a phone interview, and then I went in, and they actually had like a writing. So I actually went into the office, and they're like, "Well, will you just write a sample blog for us?" And I literally sat in the office with everybody around and did it. And they're like, "Okay, thanks, bye, see you later," And then uh, must have passed muster because they gave me the job. But
Yeah.
I guess that's I think it's really easy to sort of say, oh, I don't want to have to give away my labor for free, or
Yeah.
this sort of thing. But like in my case, like one, I was desperate, and two, it's like I intrinsically knew that I'm making a industry shift here. So like
Yeah.
I I know I don't want to give away my labor for free, but at the same time, I have to prove to them that I
Right.
can do this. And
Yeah.
so it's it's a
It's a
uh,
balance.
yeah, it's a balance. You got to find out where your line is,
Yeah.
and know that you know if you don't have a portfolio, if you don't have other stuff that's relevant, sometimes even then that they may ask you to do a test or whatever, and that's normal. It kind of sucks sometimes, to be honest with you. It's like, really, I gotta do this. Like, yeah, I can do this with my eyes closed, but like then show them you can do it with your eyes closed. Don't
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. No, but you also, again, you bring up a really important point, because because I work in medical communications, which is very similar to, it's content creation basically.
Sure.
And for my very first science writer role, I remember I had to write. I spent like maybe an hour to 2 hours writing an article. At that time, it was the COVID vaccines had just come out, and I had to write an article explaining what the mRNA vaccine was, something like that. And so I agree with you, Jason, that you don't want to do excessive work. I've heard horror stories of people who have like done 3 days of work. I don't recommend that. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
no.
necessarily, yeah. But then if it's going to take like an hour or two, maybe even 4 hours max, I would say it's worth it. It can be worth it. So no, I'm right there with you. Like, decide where your line is and then go with that. That's a really good idea. So what did on a day-to-day basis, what did your job involve?
Right. So I was, this was a marketing job, and I mean, I had done, so when I was at the University of Denver, one of the perks of being an employee there is you can take, you got basically take classes for free. And so like I took, post PhD, I did just a certificate in business just to get something under my belt. And I also did one in most of one in GIS. I think it was one class short. Just to try to, stuff I was interested in or stuff that I thought was going to help me. Right. Um, so I made this transition into marketing, and I had, whatever I learned in my marketing 101 class, which was a terrible class. The instructor was horrible. Oh my goodness. But that aside, so as a marketing, honestly, it was like a lot of just learning what the technology did, and then it's it, it's a lot of writing blogs, writing web copy. So it's not rocket science. And as an historian, you write a narrative. There's analysis and all this kind of stuff, but essentially, you have to be a storyteller. And it sounds so cliche, right? And I know that, but I've seen it, and I've been in charge of a team of writers, and it's like making those stock like archetypes, in a story, beginning, middle, end, figuring out what sort of the plot points are and how to communicate those. Like that's like the bread and butter. That's like what you have to be able to do. And so a lot of it was just, you'd meet with, the head of the marketing or one of the engineers, and you talk to them. Okay, here's our topic, or they tell us, here we need some content around this. Okay, great. So then you go find a subject matter expert, SME, SME. So you go find a SME and talk to them. Say, hey, what is this? How does it work? And you have to be able to think about what are the right questions to ask. Right? I had one of my professors in grad school, Chris Manning. I remember it was probably my first or second semester, and he always said, "You like, so what? Like, you have to figure out so what. Like, why would anybody care?" And like I've carried that with me to everything I do, and that's like honestly, that's like my mantra as a marketer is, so what? We've got all these features, all these bells and whistles, but like, so like, why should I care? Right? And so like when you go into these conversations with that in the back of my mind is, why should anybody care about this? Like, they may be interested in this field, they may be interested in this type of technology, but like, why do they care? Like, we're making this feature out to be the biggest thing in the world. Like, why do they care? And so when you go in armed with that question in the back of your mind, it's easier to then, tease those answers out of the people you're talking to, and then create the story around that. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. And then once you have those ideas, put together an outline or whatever, and then write it up, and then depending on the organization, I have always had great designers to work with, art graphic designers, and so always getting good with the graphic design team, because they will save your bacon. But yeah. So then you have like your copy, because we always say copy informs design, which informs copy. Right. And so things are going to move around. So then you have to be able to go through and edit and revise and make sure it all looks good. I mean, like, I don't have a great aesthetic eye, but so like I trust other people for that. And I think that's the other big thing is, I know it's going to sound bad, but this is not how I mean. Like, PhDs can be perhaps a little over cocky in terms of like, I'm so smart, I know all this stuff. It's like, well, yeah, we know a lot of stuff, and we think about things in ways that other folks who haven't gone through our training simply don't think that way. But that doesn't mean that other people aren't really good and smart at what they do. And so as I've matured, although questionably if you ask my wife, um, as I've matured professionally, let's put it that way, I've learned that um, the sooner you can understand what other folks bring to the table and recognize their strengths and lean into those and say, hey, look, I'm gonna give this to you. I trust you. And you do your thing, and then the end result is better. So that was a really long answer to what was like the day to day like. But I mean, it's just a lot of thinking, a lot of collaboration, a lot of going back and forth. And I always say cross functional, right? So
Yeah.
that's the buzzword. It's like that's like, oh, I work with people in sales, I work with people in product, I work with people in engineering, I work with people in design, that kind of stuff. So it's and content is the thing that makes everything else go in an organization, really, because you need stuff to, right? So it's like an extremely cross-functional role, and so you have to be able to have those interactions, which
Yeah.
I tend to be very introverted, and I don't like to do that, but I somehow tend. I think I'm good at it is because of my humanities training, and
Right.
I'm able to understand you know some of these relationships and power dynamics and whatnot, and so I'm able to balance those in a way that I probably wouldn't otherwise. I'd probably just get mad and leave.
No, but I think the answer is brilliance, right? Because you really did walk through, because this my experience sort of mirrors yours in the fact that you work with so many people's work ultimately you become the person that produces that customer facing piece, but that means that you need to talk to everybody, right? In my case, I need to talk to the R&D scientists, sometimes I need to talk to the product managers, sometimes I need to kind of get marketing's input on what they're thinking and where they're going with their plans, so it really is a functional, cross divisional type of role. So thank you for explaining it the way that you did. And this is a great segue into then my next question, which is talking about transferable skills, because what I hear here is writing is clearly your main job is writing, right? But then also the skill of collaboration, like you said, your humanities training prepared you for that. What other skills would you say transferred over from your academic experience to your writing work?
Yeah, so on the writing piece first, I will say that it's writing in the business world is very different than writing in academia. Like academic writing, I find to be very stifling, very boring, full of jargon. You're never going to use the word praxis in marketing, okay? So, it's just not going to happen. But that said, it's, in humanities, I know, our dissertations tend to be very, very long and very, text heavy. I know it's other disciplines, they're, like math or something, they can be really short and a lot of figures. But like for a writing heavy discipline, the type of writing you do in the professional world is so different, but it's so easy. Like compared to like if you've done a PhD, you've written like a 200-300 page manuscript, like writing an 800 word blog post is a walk in the park. It is so easy. Like I kid you not. So it's very transferable. And the thing then is because probably at this point you've done so much writing in your academic work, like fast. Like you can churn this stuff out. I mean, at least I can. And I'm assuming most other PhDs would be able to do the same. And so then the challenge becomes load management, right? Because if you come in and you're like all of a sudden now I'm producing 5 blog posts a week, that's hard to sustain. So I'm not telling people like if you get in this kind of work, like don't like show people what you can do, but also like don't be so overzealous when you start that you create uh, you know uh, um, unscalable expectations, right? Because what I found is that because I tend to be good and I tend to be fast, I'm the one that everybody always comes to for stuff. And so you have to recognize because of your training, because of your abilities, you may become a sort of a go-to person when you. So you have to think about that. You may not want to be, not all the time, and so that's again that gets into that collaboration and that piece, and then how do you navigate that? How do
Yeah.
you sort of push back on things like, well, so, but negotiated power, right? I mean, that's the types of things we always talk about. Michel Foucault, type of stuff, and all the good stuff, in grad school. It's like, well, let's think about power. How do these things actually work? So, I mean, just having those frameworks in your mind, has always been beneficial to me, and just understanding, why is this person talking to me this way? It's like, oh, because there's this dynamic, and that they don't even understand or recognize it, but like I do, and so then it's being able to do that. So there are a lot of soft skills, right? Writing is more of a hard skill,
Hmm.
but I think there's this, it's almost like I would say like a worldview, like understanding like how things work, how like history is all about social interaction and and change over time, right? And like the way that all these different you know vectors intersect and diverge, and just being able to take a lot of those abstract things and make them concrete, I think is really important. And as when I interview for jobs, now people are like, oh, what are you good at? And it's like, a lot, especially in tech, everybody wants to say, oh, we need somebody that can take, talk to engineers and take all these complex things and boil them down. It's like that's what this sort of training does, right? You've got disparate sources. I mean, whether you're in the medical field, like you were, or medical sciences, or like humanities, like I was, you take, like newspaper clippings, like 3 lines, whatever, and secondary sources. You take a graph over here and be able to synthesize all that, and then present it in a way that is makes sense to a broad audience. That
Yeah.
is like a huge skill, and it's funny, we don't necessarily think about it that way because that's just what we do.
Yeah.
But again, it's being able to name it attainment, right, as therapists say, and recognize what it is. And so then when you're doing your resume and you put it into Chat GPT and you say, hey, optimize this resume for whatever here, cross-functional collaboration, right? Those are like
Yeah.
keywords. You know, um, you know, Distilling complex ideas into broadly understandable, whatever. That kind of language is what people are looking for,
Yeah.
and that's the type of stuff that folks with our training tend to be very good at.
Yeah, such a brilliant answer, right? And I can tell you have humanities training. It's such a brilliant answer, because there are just so many facets to it. So I love how you laid that out. That it's so much more, and then of course you develop skills on the way. I remember when you talked about the fact that you are an introvert, and so yeah, some of your training helped, but you do end up developing some of it along the way. So if you are coming into a career like this, and you're not going to come ready cooked, you're going to come with some stuff, but there's stuff you'll learn on the way as well. Thank you for sharing that. So Jason, would you go back to academia?
Would I go back? You know, that's that's a great question. It depends. It depends on the context. Um, you know, would I love to have access to an academic library again? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I I I've one of the before I get into that, let me sort of do a quick little detour. So, I I still have lots of friends in the academy. Some of my absolute best friends are still teaching. And it seems to me there tends to be this, and you see it online all the time. People are, well, if I leave, then I can't. I'm never going to do this stuff again. I mean, that's not true. Because honestly, in the private sector, someone with our type of training is, you may not have a high paying job initially, but the opportunities are there, and you can make a lot more money. And so if you're making more money, then you can still afford to be active in your professional organizations, right? So like mine is the ACIS, the American Conference for Irish Studies. And so, even as an independent scholar, like I mean, I haven't recently, but since COVID, but still present papers, write papers, present papers, go to conferences. I mean, you're paying on your own dime now, but you're probably making more money, so you can afford it. And so, like, you don't have to give up, um, your pursuits. You just do them in your free time now. So just the way that you think about it is changed. You don't need it for career advancement. It's something that you can just do for fun. I've got an article that I've written that's like, I don't know, maybe 5 years old at this point. I just sort of been sitting on it. I've been writing music instead of academic stuff. But like it's been in the back of my mind. Oh yeah, I need to go polish that up and see if I can get it published, because I think it's a great topic. So you can still remain in it. The challenge, right, is getting some of those secondary sources. The interlibrary loan was always, again, a bread and butter thing, right? So would I go back? Yeah, I'd love to teach. Like, I'd adjunct. Like, I don't think I would ever go back full time. But if I could pick up a course, teaching something that I know really well, yeah, I'd do that. I'm not holding out hope for that, but if anything, I think the publishing, actually, it's funny. So one of my good buddies, he's a history professor out at Idaho State, and he was working with some other folks to put together an edited collection, and he asked me to contribute a chapter. So I said, yeah, sure. So like, whatever, went down, wrote my chapter, and I told him, like, oh, I'm done, but whatever by the deadline was, and he's like, yeah, I don't know if this project's going to get off the ground. It's like nobody else submitted anything yet. And like, it's basically, like, I was the only one who submitted anything like on time.
Yes.
And so actually I have that article too that I could still try to publish somewhere.
Exactly.
So there's just a lot more freedom. You may not get the publications or the accolades that you might have otherwise received, but again, you don't need them for career advancement. So you can stay in the academy in only the parts that you want to. You don't have to do the drudgery that you may not want to.
Right. I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
Because this is something I've been thinking about recently. And, because recently one of the universities around me was advertising for biology adjuncts. And I'm like, should I do this? I don't know. Do I want to? But then, just hearing your answer right now, it's brilliant, because when you step out of academia, I think people always think it's a zero sum game. Like, if I leave,
Right.
I cannot go back. If I leave, then I cannot participate. And you gave two perfect examples. Number one is being an adjunct, and number two is being part of these professional associations where you can submit papers. And yes, in my field, a lot of these associations want lab work, and so I'm not in a lab right now. But there are op-eds, and there are opportunities for you to do, a more descriptive article. And so there are opportunities. It depends on, I think you just have to look for them. And like you said, participate in the parts you want to, and leave the stuff that you don't want out. I love it.
Yeah. All my publications have my dissertation was published as a book, both hardcover and paperback edition. That's all been, post PhD, post leaving the academia. I've had a chapter in an edited collection, book reviews. Done a bunch of those, and it's all as an independent scholar. It can't be done if you have the time and the energy for it. You can do it. It's not. You're right. I love when you put it. It's not a zero sum game. It's like you can dip your toe in where you want, how you want, and you can even help sort of create, the opportunities that to show what you've got, like how you want to. Create a blog or a podcast or something.
Right.
So
Right.
there are lots of other ways to sort of stay involved with your research, with that academic identity that don't involve having a tenure track job.
Right.
Those don't exist anymore.
Really?
So they're right. But there are a lot of ways to stay involved, and you can choose how you do it. And it takes some thinking, perhaps, and maybe a little bit of elbow grease. But at the end of the day, you get to decide, instead of having your tenure review board decide if what you've done is good enough. Like, it doesn't matter what they, because they don't, they don't exist.
Whew, so many gems. Thank you so much for sharing, Jason. Any last wise words for the person
Uh,
that is, maybe not doing a PhD in Irish history, but is doing something, in the arts and humanities, and it's like I don't see a path forward in academia, and I want to leave. What last words would you give that person?
yeah, I think the big thing to me is, and it's going to sound cliche, but I don't want it to. It's really not. It's like think about what are you actually interested in,
Hmm.
right? So, and like for me, like it's like just broadly technology. Like I'm not technical. Like I'm not a coder. I can't write SQL queries or Python code, but I I, I still find it interesting, and I just can if I talk to an engineer, like they can explain to me like how it works, and I understand, right? So like I went into technology because like hey, technology is neat, and I can understand it, right? So think about like what those things are, what are you interested in, and then you know find this a way for you to sort of get to that, but do
Hmm.
that before you finish or before you're on the job market, so you can start developing those skills, or if you can even do it as part of your doctoral training.
Yeah.
Like for example, for me, like I love maps, always loved maps, and so like that's why I did that GIS certificate, just because I wanted to make maps, and then hey, I ended up putting using one of those in the paperback edition of my book, I think. Is that? Yeah. So I was able to actually update it and put a new plate in there with a new updated map. Hey, that was cool. Um, and like for my program, they introduced it as a research tool once I had already done all my research tools. So like, but the point is like, if you have a research tool, you know, type of requirement, you know, is that something that you can parlay into something else down the line? Like GIS is a great example of that.
Yeah.
So if you can identify those things, work toward those before you have to get up, because what you want to do is you want to be able to have and start a portfolio, create an online portfolio, just a dumping ground for all the different types of work you do. It could be abstracts, book reviews, um, you know, again, creating maps, a podcast, whatever it may be. Have and start collecting now, and just like a CV, right? But it's a lot more flexible than that. Your CV just tells you, sort of that something exists, but having something that someone can click on and actually see what it says, and what how can you write? Are you a good writer? Are you a good podcast voice? So they can actually, again, so they can dip a toe into your work and see if you're a fit or not. So I guess those are the two things that I would, start, your cross training, I guess, cross train early, and then start a portfolio early, and
Yeah.
you'll put yourself in a good place. Oh, and don't be afraid to use Chat GPT to optimize your resume. Actually, I was just doing that. Remember, it's not the end all. Like I'm not like one of these like all pro gung ho AI people, but it's helpful, right?
Yeah.
So put it in there, but then once it gives you thing back, then go back and edit it,
Hmm.
because it's not the end all be all. But it's helpful to say, hey, if you're a hiring manager for fill in the blank, optimize this resume for someone hiring X position, right? And you
Yeah.
can do that, and it's a good starting point. I always like AI stuff. I think is a good blank white page
Yeah.
thing, right? So instead of staring at the blank white page, get it in there, get something to chew on, and then you can update and revise.
Yeah.
But it just does a lot of the 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 grunt work for you.
Yeah.
So I guess those would be three tips that I've would give at this
Would
point.
give. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. Thank you, Jason. This was such a valuable conversation. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
great. I hope folks find it useful, and you can always, if your viewers have any further questions, they can find me on LinkedIn or wherever and reach out, and happy to do whatever. So I appreciate you
Absolutely.
taking the time.
Absolutely.